He promised patience. And that night she discovered what it means to be truly loved. No one imagined that moment would change everything between them forever. Where are you watching this story from? Subscribe to the channel and leave a like, because the ending of this story will touch your heart deeply. When Celeste felt Donovan's hands tremble as they held hers that winter night, she never imagined that this powerful man, owner of an empire spanning 3 states, was about to crumble before her like a house of cards. The luxurious room around them seemed to disappear. The burgundy velvet curtains, the scent of century-old oak, and the distant sound of the piano. Everything dissolved when he whispered in a choked voice, "I promise to wait as long as you need." There was something in those words that pierced through the defenses Celeste had built over 22 years of survival. It wasn't a grandiose declaration or an empty promise from a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. It was the sincere surrender of someone who had learned, through pain, that true love didn't demand, didn't rush, didn't conquer. It simply waited. The young woman had arrived in Charleston 6 months earlier, fleeing from a family in rural Mississippi who wanted to marry her off to a brutal soybean farmer from Yazoo City. She carried only a worn suitcase and the scribbled address of a distant cousin who worked as a housekeeper in one of the mansions in the Battery District. The smell of salt air and fresh oysters in the city market was so different from the dry, hot air of her homeland that she spent hours simply breathing by the waterfront park, feeling free for the first time in her life. Outside, the cold Atlantic wind moaned through the centuries-old live oaks in the garden. Donovan's fingers, weathered by decades of work and struggles, trembled imperceptibly against her skin. In his dark hazel eyes, Celeste saw something she had never seen in any man's gaze: absolute vulnerability. Not desire disguised as tenderness that she knew, not possessiveness wrapped in pretty words. It was genuine fear of losing her, combined with the certainty that he would do nothing to keep her against her will. "I don't know if I can," she finally whispered, her southern accent mixing with unshed tears. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust." Donovan nodded slowly. The chandelier light cast dancing shadows across his face, chiseled by 45 years of intense living. He had silver streaks at his temples that shone like metal, and lines around his eyes that spoke of past smiles, and also tears shed in solitude. "Then I only ask that you let me try to change that," he responded. "One day at a time. No pressure. No expectations. Just being." That conversation would mark the beginning of something extraordinary. Because in a world that demanded speed, immediate results, and overwhelming passions, 2 wounded souls had just agreed to something revolutionary: to build love with patience, like someone cultivating a garden, knowing that the most beautiful flowers are those that take longest to bloom. Donovan had first seen her in the garden of the neighboring property, where she had gotten a job as a gardening assistant. She was on her knees in the damp earth, dark hair tied with a simple bandana, humming an old gospel tune while planting jasmine seeds. The South Carolina businessman, at 45, had lost the ability to be surprised, or so he thought, until he saw that scene of purity that reminded him of something he thought dead inside himself: hope. The first encounters were cautious. He would appear with improbable excuses, checking the stone fence dividing the properties, discussing the hydrangeas that needed pruning. She pretended not to notice that a man of his stature wouldn't need to do such things personally. But there was something in the way he spoke, with that soft, low-country accent, unhurried, without arrogance, that made her lower her guard. One September morning, while dew still glittered on the leaves and the sun barely peeked over the Ashley River, Celeste looked up and found him watching her from the other side of the fence. Not with lust, but with an expression of almost childlike wonder. "Roots need space to breathe," she said, pointing to the furrows she had dug. "If you squeeze them too tight, they suffocate. If you neglect them, they dry out." Donovan smiled slowly. "Are we just talking about plants?" She felt herself blush, but held his gaze. "In Mississippi, I learned that almost everything in life works the same way. Too much pressure kills, too much distance too." It was the beginning of conversations that extended beyond what was appropriate between a businessman and a gardener. He told her about his childhood on a humble farm near Monk's Corner, where he learned to work before he learned to read, where his father fished in the cold waters of Lake Moultrie, and his mother sewed quilts they sold at market. He spoke of how, at 16, he had started loading crates at the Charleston port, working 18-hour days until he saved enough to buy his first truck, then his first warehouse, building an import empire load by load, contract by contract. "What about your family?" asked Celeste one afternoon, while they pruned roses under a grey sky threatening rain. Donovan's expression darkened. "I married young. Too young. I believed that material success was enough to keep a family together. I was wrong. She left me 8 years ago, and I can't blame her. I gave everything except what she really needed, my presence, my time, my genuine attention." Celeste saw authentic pain in his eyes. Not self-pity, but the painful understanding of someone who had learned his lessons the hard way. "And since then," she asked gently, "since then, I've built more businesses, traveled the world, signed million-dollar contracts." He paused, plucking withered petals from a rose. "And I've been completely alone, until I saw you planting jasmine and singing gospel like no one was watching." Celeste's heart leapt, but fear was stronger. In her town, pretty words always preceded demands. Men who spoke of love invariably wanted possession. Her own father had loved her mother to the point of taking away all her freedom, all her joy, all spark of life. "Mr. Ashford," she said formally, creating distance with the title, "I appreciate the conversation, but—" "Donovan," he interrupted softly, "just Donovan, and you don't need to thank me for anything or explain anything." He stood up, brushing dirt from his hands. "But I hope you know that when I look at you, I don't see a gardener from another place. I see someone extraordinarily brave who dared to start over in a place where no one knows her, where the climate is different, where everything is hostile. That deserves respect, not condescension." Celeste watched him walk away, his tall, dignified figure disappearing among the trees, and for the first time in her life, she wondered if perhaps there existed men different from those she had known. Men who saw strength where others saw weakness, who offered respect where others demanded submission. The seeds of something dangerous had just been planted in her heart, and like the jasmine she tended so carefully, they would need time, patience, and the right conditions to bloom. The change in Donovan's routine didn't go unnoticed. Marcus, his oldest partner, a practical man from Atlanta who knew every emotional scar of his boss, found him one morning in the office overlooking Charleston Harbor, staring distractedly at the ships instead of reviewing the export contracts waiting for his signature. "This isn't like you," Marcus commented, setting a cup of black coffee on the mahogany desk. "You've been arriving late, leaving early, smiling for no apparent reason for 3 weeks now." Donovan turned in his chair, and Marcus saw in his face something he hadn't seen in years, hope mixed with an almost adolescent vulnerability. "I met someone," he said simply. "The girl from the south, the gardener." Marcus sat down, crossing his arms. "The gossip has already reached the cafes on King Street. You know how this city is, Donovan. Small, conservative. She's too young, comes from another world. People will talk. Let them talk." Donovan responded with a firmness that surprised even himself. "I've spent decades worrying about what Charleston society thinks. I built an empire to prove that a fisherman's son could rub shoulders with old families. And in the end, what did I gain? Money, yes. Superficial respect also. But I woke up every morning for the last 8 years in an empty house, surrounded by luxuries that meant nothing." Marcus sighed deeply. "This isn't the first time I've seen you like this. Remember Catherine, 3 years ago. You thought she was different, that you'd finally found—" "Celeste isn't Catherine," Donovan interrupted sharply. "Catherine wanted my money, my position. Celeste doesn't even know what I'm worth. When I invited her to dinner last week at Husk, she declined, saying she didn't have appropriate clothes. You know what I did? I took her to a simple BBQ place in Mount Pleasant, where they serve ribs and mac and cheese. And it was the best dinner I've had in years, because she laughed sincerely, because she told stories of her childhood among cotton fields without pretending to be someone she's not. She carries her own weight," he continued. "Arrives early to work, stays until the garden is perfect, doesn't ask for favors, doesn't expect gifts. In fact, when I tried to give her a medical book I saw in a bookstore, she at first refused it, saying she couldn't accept something so expensive." Marcus studied his friend for a long time. They had built this empire together, survived economic crises, ruthless competitors, the loss of entire shipments in coastal storms. He knew Donovan better than anyone, And what he saw now was a man on the edge of a decision that would change his life forever. And her? Does she feel the same? Donovan lowered his gaze. She's afraid. Very afraid. She says she doesn't know how to trust, that all the men she knew wanted to control her, that her father tried to sell her like cattle to a brutal man. His voice hardened. And when I hear those stories, Marcus, I want to drive to Mississippi and confront those cowards who call themselves men, but treat women like property. Then go slow, Marcus advised. If it's really different, if there's something genuine there, time will reveal it. But also protect her from what's coming, because you know as well as I do that this city can be cruel to outsiders, especially those who dare to get close to one of its own. He was right. That same afternoon, while Donovan was closing a contract with Norwegian importers at the Charleston Place Hotel, he heard the first venomous comment. A woman from high society, widow of a former banker, whispered loudly enough to be heard, "Poor Donovan Ashford. After everything he built, now he lets himself get entangled by some nobody from the South who probably only sees his bank accounts." Donovan stopped in his tracks. He turned slowly, and the room fell silent, seeing the contained fury on his usually friendly face. "Mrs. Pemberton," he said in a dangerously calm voice, "if I hear you speak that way about Celeste Munro again, be assured that your family will never again have business with any company where I have influence. And believe me, in this city, my influence is considerable." The woman paled. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Donovan left without looking back, knowing he had just declared silent war against anyone who dared to hurt the woman, who, without planning it, had begun to conquer his heart simply by being herself. But the warning came too late. The seeds of social poison had already been planted, and like weeds they would grow quickly if not pulled out by the roots. The invitation arrived 2 weeks later in a cream-colored envelope with the seal of the Charleston Club. Vivienne Ashford, Donovan's niece and administrator of an important division of his businesses, was organizing a charity dinner. Donovan was invited, and specifically, it mentioned he could bring a companion. "It's a trap," Celeste said immediately when he showed her the invitation in the garden. She had dirt under her nails, and her face flushed from the October sun. "Your niece doesn't know me, has never seen me. Why would she want me there?" "Because she needs to see you," Donovan responded with brutal honesty. "Vivienne manages 30% of export operations. She's brilliant, ambitious, and since my brother, her father, died 5 years ago, she's convinced herself she's my natural heir. Seeing me with someone, especially someone young, scares her." "Then I shouldn't go," said Celeste, returning to her roses. "I don't want to cause problems between you and your family." Donovan gently took her dirt-stained hand, making her look at him. "Celeste, if we run from this now, we'll always be running. Vivienne and Charleston society need to understand something. You're not temporary, you're not a whim, and you deserve to be anywhere I am, not because you're mine, but because you're extraordinary in your own right." She felt panic rising in her throat. "I don't have appropriate clothes for a place like that. I don't know how to behave among people from your world. They have social codes that—" "Then we'll go together as learners," he interrupted with a smile. "I also feel out of place at those events, even though I've attended for decades. And as for clothes, will you at least let me take you to a store where we can find something you feel comfortable in? Not a dress that turns you into someone you're not, but something that simply makes you feel safe." 3 days later, Celeste found herself in front of a mirror in a discreet boutique in the historic district, wearing a midnight blue dress, simple but elegant, that reminded her of the color of the Atlantic at sunset. The attendant, a kind older woman named Eleanor, had understood perfectly what they needed: elegance without ostentation, class without shouting. "You're beautiful," Donovan whispered, and Celeste saw in his eyes that he meant it sincerely, without exaggeration. The night of the dinner arrived with a fine drizzle typical of Charleston. The club, a historic Belle Epoque building near the Battery, glowed with golden light. Celeste felt her legs tremble as she entered on Donovan's arm, aware of the stares that pierced her like invisible stingers. Vivienne waited for them in the main hall, an elegant 30-year-old woman with blonde hair pulled into a perfect chignon and calculating eyes that assessed Celeste in 3 seconds. "So, you're the famous gardener," she said with a cold smile. "From where exactly? Mississippi? How quaint." Donovan tensed his jaw, but before he could respond, an older woman approached. It was Eleanor Pemberton, matriarch of one of South Carolina's oldest families. "Donovan, dear," she said, kissing him on both cheeks before turning her attention to Celeste. "And this is your friend?" The tone insinuated everything without saying anything explicitly. "Celeste Monroe," she introduced herself, extending her hand with more courage than she felt. "It's a pleasure to meet you." "Monroe," the woman repeated, savoring the surname. "From Mississippi, I imagine. How exotic." The dinner was a carefully orchestrated torture. Vivienne had placed Celeste between two women who made a point of using Southern expressions and local references she didn't understand, making her feel excluded. The questions were like knives wrapped in velvet. "Did you study at any well-known university? Does your family have businesses in the South? How exactly did you meet Donovan? It must be an interesting story." Celeste responded with painful honesty. No, she'd had to leave school at 16. Her family grew cotton in a town most had never heard of. She'd met Donovan because she worked in the neighboring garden. Each answer was received with condescending smiles and exchanged looks full of meaning. It was when a particularly venomous lady, Vivienne's close friend, commented loud and clear, "It's just that girls from Mississippi don't know their place here in Charleston. They always arrive looking for opportunities." Celeste felt hot tears threatening to overflow, but before she could get up and flee, Donovan stood with such force that his chair wobbled. The noise made the entire room fall silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said in a calm but lethal voice, "allow me to clarify something. Celeste Monroe is the most honorable woman I've ever met in my life. She works from dawn to dusk, without asking favors from anyone. She fled from a family that wanted to sell her like property, and had the courage to start from scratch in a strange land. That's more courage than most present have ever shown, hiding behind old surnames and inherited fortunes." He paused, looking directly at Vivienne. "And if anyone in this room, family or not, can't see her value, then that person doesn't deserve to be under my roof or benefit from my work." The silence was absolute. Donovan took Celeste's hand, which was visibly trembling. "We're leaving. Good night." They walked in silence under the fine drizzle to the car. Only when they were inside, with the windows fogging up and the sound of water hitting the roof, did Celeste begin to sob. Not delicate tears, but deep crying of accumulated humiliation and pain. "I'm sorry," she said between sobs. "I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have come. I don't belong in your world. I never will." Donovan hugged her tightly, letting her tears soak his expensive shirt. "Listen to me carefully," he said, in a voice trembling with contained fury. "It's not my world you don't belong to. It's that rotten world that doesn't deserve to have you. And if I have to choose between that hypocritical society and you, I choose you. Always." But as he held her, they both knew that words, however beautiful, wouldn't erase the scars of that night. The poison had penetrated deep, and the question neither dared ask aloud echoed in the silence. Would love be enough to overcome the weight of social judgment? The following days were tense. Celeste stopped going to work in the garden, locking herself in the small room she shared with her cousin Mira in an apartment in North Charleston. Donovan called, sent messages, but she responded with monosyllables. Fear had returned with renewed force, whispering that she had been naive to believe it could work, that the differences were too great. On the morning of the 5th day, Mira found her packing her worn suitcase. "What are you doing?" she asked in alarm. "Going back to Mississippi," Celeste replied without looking at her, folding her clothes meticulously. "It was a mistake to come. It was a mistake to believe I could escape my destiny." "Your destiny." Mira took a shirt from her hands. "Marrying that brute who hit you during your engagement because you dared to contradict him. Living in a town where women are their husband's property. Celeste, you've been here 6 months. You've smiled more in these months than in your entire life." "And look where that smile got me," Celeste responded bitterly, "being humiliated by people who see me as a gold digger, as some nobody from the South who doesn't know her place." "What they think doesn't matter," Mira insisted. "What matters is what you want. And I know what I saw in your eyes when you talked about Donovan. For the first time you met a man who treats you as an equal, who respects you, who lives in a world I'll never belong to," Celeste interrupted. "Mira, I'm not stupid. I can wear expensive clothes and learn elegant manners, but I'll always be the daughter of poor cotton farmers from Mississippi. I'll always have this accent. I'll always be the outsider. And sooner or later he'll realize I'm not worth the social price he's paying. A loud knock on the door interrupted them. Mira opened it and stepped back in surprise. Donovan was there without his usual elegance. He wore jeans, a wrinkled shirt, several days of beard growth. He looked like he hadn't slept. "I need to talk to you," he said, looking directly at Celeste. "There's nothing to talk about," she responded, returning to her suitcase. "I resigned," he said simply. Celeste stopped in place. Mira let out a gasp. "What?" Donovan entered, closing the door behind him. "This morning, I called an extraordinary board meeting. I resigned from the presidency of Ashford Imports. I delegated all operational responsibilities to Marcus and a professional management team. I remain the majority shareholder, but I'll no longer be involved in day-to-day decisions." "You're crazy," Celeste whispered. "That company is your life. You built it from nothing." "No," Donovan corrected, approaching slowly. "It was my life. Past tense. I dedicated 30 years to building an empire while losing my marriage, while losing myself. I built wealth but forgot to live. And then you came, planting flowers and singing gospel, and you showed me what really matters. You can't give up everything for me." Celeste felt panic in her voice. "If this doesn't work out, if—" "I'm not giving up for you," he interrupted firmly. "I'm giving up for me, because I realized I had become a slave to my own success, to social expectations, to a world that values appearances over authenticity. You only helped me see it." He sat on the edge of the bed, exhausted. "Celeste, I'm not asking you to stay for me. I'm asking you to stay for yourself, because running back to Mississippi isn't going home. It's surrendering to fear. It's letting petty, bitter people decide your future. But your family, Vivian will have to accept it or leave. I've already made it clear that her behavior was unacceptable. As for my extended family and Charleston society, let them talk all they want. I've lived decades seeking their approval. And you know what I discovered? That their respect is conditional, superficial. I'd rather be despised being true to myself than adored living a lie." Celeste felt something break inside her. Not her defenses, but the chains she had dragged all her life, the ones that told her she didn't deserve more, that she should settle, that she had no right to dream. "I'm afraid," she finally admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "So afraid of believing in this, and then—" "I'm afraid too," Donovan confessed, taking her hands tenderly. "Afraid of not being enough. Afraid that my past mistakes will condemn me. Afraid of losing you. But I've learned that fear only disappears when we face it, not when we run from it." There was a long silence. Outside, they could hear the traffic of North Charleston, voices of children playing in the street, the ordinary life of a city that didn't know that in that small apartment a silent battle was being waged between fear and hope. Finally, Celeste closed the suitcase. She didn't put it away, but she closed it. It was a small but significant gesture. "I don't promise to stay forever," she said. "I don't promise this will work, but you'll stay until you know for sure," he completed. "And that's enough for me." Mira, who had witnessed everything from a corner, wiped silent tears. She knew she had just witnessed something rare. Two people choosing courage over security, authenticity over convenience. But what neither of them knew was that the real test was just beginning. Because Vivian wasn't one to give up easily, and the demons of Celeste's past had not yet been completely exorcised. The weeks following brought seismic changes. Donovan kept his word. He reduced his active participation in the business to occasional meetings, dedicating his time to something he had never done, simply living. He proposed to Celeste that they travel together along the Carolina coast, but always with Mira accompanying them, respecting her boundaries, allowing her to feel safe. They visited Beaufort, where the historic waterfront homes and moss-draped oaks seemed to hold ancient secrets. They walked along Hunting Island, where the ocean broke violently against dramatic cliffs, and Celeste felt for the first time that she could breathe without the weight of social judgment. In Hilton Head, they ate fresh crab and shrimp at a simple beachfront restaurant where no one knew them. Donovan told stories of when he was young, when he worked to exhaustion and dreamed of a better future, but never stopped to enjoy the present. "You know when was the last time I sat in a restaurant like this?" he said, breaking bread with his hands. "With my father, before he died. I was 21 and had just bought my second truck. I was so obsessed with explaining my expansion plans that I didn't pay attention to what he was saying. He died 2 months later, heart attack while mending nets, and I realized I didn't remember the sound of his laugh." Celeste placed her hand over his. "You're honoring him now. You learned the lesson he wanted to teach you." 30 years late, Donovan said bitterly. "It's never too late to change," she responded, surprising herself with the wisdom of her words. "My grandmother used to say the oldest trees give the best shade. Time doesn't ruin, it refines." He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. "How is it that a 22-year-old is wiser than me with all my experience?" Celeste smiled sadly. "Because suffering is a cruel but effective teacher, and I had many lessons in Mississippi." Little by little, Celeste's walls began to crack. One afternoon in Edisto Island, while they watched dolphins from the beach and the cool wind tangled her hair, she told him about her childhood, about her father, a brutally traditional man who saw women as tools for work and procreation, about her mother, a woman who had been beautiful and dreamy until marriage turned her into a silent shadow, about her older brothers who saw her as a burden, another mouth to feed. "When I turned 16, they wanted me to quit school," she recounted. "They said education in a woman was a waste, that my place was helping at home until they found a suitable husband. But I had a teacher, Miss Sarah, who saw something in me. She secretly lent me books about medicine, biology. I dreamed of being a doctor, helping women like my mother who suffered in silence." "And what happened?" Donovan asked gently. "My father discovered the books. He burned them in the yard in front of me. He said they were dangerous ideas, that they were filling my head with improper ambitions." Her voice broke. "I remember seeing the pages turn to ashes, my dreams literally becoming smoke. And the man they wanted you to marry?" Celeste visibly shuddered. "Silas Dutton, soybean farmer, 43, widowed twice. They said he was a good catch because he had land and money. The first time they left me alone with him, he tried to force a kiss. When I resisted, he slapped me. Said wives should be obedient, that I'd soon learn my place." "God!" Donovan closed his eyes, fighting the urge to drive to Mississippi and confront that coward. "My mother saw the bruise," Celeste continued. "I know she saw it. But when I begged her to help me, she only said, 'Men are like that. You'll learn to endure it like we all do.' That night I decided I'd rather die than become her." "How did you escape?" "Mira sent me money in secret. She had come to Charleston 2 years before, escaping a similar situation. One night, while everyone was sleeping, I took my hidden suitcase and walked 15 miles to the nearest bus station. I never looked back." Donovan held her as she trembled with the memories. He understood then the magnitude of her trauma, why every masculine gesture made her recoil, why the idea of romantic love seemed like an elaborate trap. "Celeste," he said with a firm voice, "you'll never be like your mother, because you already made the bravest decision. You chose your freedom over security. You chose dignity over survival. That's something no one can ever take from you." She looked up, eyes red, but with something new shining in them, the understanding that her past didn't have to define her future. That night, back in Charleston, Celeste made a decision. She wrote a letter to Miss Sarah, her old teacher, telling her about her life in the South Carolina coast, about the medical books she could now buy with her salary, about the dream of someday resuming her studies. It was a symbolic but powerful act, reconnecting with the part of her that had been buried but never completely dead. Donovan, for his part, secretly enrolled her in GED classes at a community school in West Ashley, not to change who she was, but so she would have tools to defend herself in a society that used education as a weapon of exclusion. They were, slowly, building something new. Not a fairy tale where the prince rescued the princess, but something deeper. Two wounded people helping each other heal, respecting each other's time, growing together instead of one absorbing the other. But in the shadows, Vivian watched, and envy was a poison that grew more dangerous with each passing day. The attack came where they least expected it. Vivian, after weeks of apparent silence, invited Donovan to an urgent business meeting. It was, supposedly, about an important investment opportunity in the Savannah port sector that required his specific knowledge. Donovan arrived at the headquarters on East Bay Street, a glass and steel building that had been the symbol of his success. Vivienne was waiting for him in the boardroom, but she wasn't alone. There were 3 board members, all older men from traditional South Carolina families. "Sit down, Uncle," Vivienne said with professional coldness. "We need to discuss the company's future." Donovan felt something wasn't right, but he sat down. "I thought this was about the Savannah investment." "This is more important," one of the board members intervened, Robert Whitfield. "In recent weeks, your behavior has been erratic. You resigned from your position without proper consultation, delegate critical responsibilities, and all because of—" he made a calculated pause. "A personal distraction." "Celeste isn't a distraction," Donovan responded in a dangerously calm voice. "Whatever she is," Robert continued, "she's affecting the company. Partners are worried. Stock has dropped 3% since your announcement. There are rumors of instability." Vivienne placed a folder on the table. "And then there's this." Donovan opened it. It contained photographs of Celeste in various Charleston locations, clearly taken without her knowledge. There were also documents, medical records, reports from a private investigator, and a particularly disturbing page with personal information from Mississippi. "What the hell is this?" Donovan felt fury beginning to boil. "It's due diligence," Vivienne responded coldly. "I hired an investigator, and what he discovered is problematic." "Problematic," Donovan repeated incredulously. Vivienne pointed to a specific document. "According to Dr. Morrison from Yazoo City, Celeste Monroe went to a clinic 8 months ago, 2 months before coming to Charleston, to confirm a pregnancy. The record shows she was 6 weeks pregnant." The silence in the room was absolute. Donovan felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. "And what happened to that pregnancy?" asked one of the board members. "Apparently voluntary termination," Vivienne responded. "Or perhaps miscarriage. The records aren't clear. But what is clear is that she never told you, right?" Donovan stared at the document, his mind racing in 1,000 directions. "This can't be real. It has to be a mistake." "The documents have the official seal of the Mississippi Department of Health," Vivienne insisted. "Uncle, I understand you're infatuated, but you need to face reality. This woman has secrets. She possibly came here fleeing from something more than an arranged marriage." Donovan stood up abruptly, taking the folder. "This meeting is over." "Wait," Vivienne stood up. "Don't act impulsively again. We just want to protect you. If this becomes public, if the sensationalist press finds out that magnate Donovan Ashford is with a woman with such a murky past—" "Enough!" Donovan roared, hitting the table with such force that everyone stepped back. "I'm not interested in protecting my public image. I'm interested in the truth. And if Celeste has secrets, she has a right to them until she decides to share them. Her past is hers, not material for your invasive investigation." "But—" Robert began. "You're fired," Donovan said, looking at the board members. "Effective immediately. And you," he pointed at Vivienne, "have until the end of the month to remove your things from this office. You no longer work for any Ashford company." "You can't do that," Vivienne shouted, her composure finally breaking. "I'm family. I've dedicated 10 years to this business." "And I dedicated 30 years building it," Donovan responded with a voice of steel. "It's my company, my name, my decision. You crossed a line that can't be uncrossed, secretly investigating someone, violating their privacy, trying to use their past as a weapon. That's not business. That's cruelty. And there's no place for cruelty in my life." He left the office, leaving stunned silence, but as he drove back to the Battery, gripping the steering wheel tightly, his mind was a whirlwind. Was it true? Had Celeste been pregnant? Why hadn't she told him? And more importantly, did it matter? The answer came clear as Atlantic water. No, it didn't matter, because every person had a right to their past, to their secrets, to reveal their wounds in their own time. But part of him felt betrayed by not having been trusted with something so significant. When he arrived at the garden where he knew he'd find Celeste working, she looked up and smiled, but the smile died when she saw his expression. What happened? Donovan extended the folder without saying a word. Celeste opened it, and with each page she turned, her face transformed from confusion to to absolute horror. This can't be real, she whispered. Where did you get this? Vivienne hired a private investigator, he responded with a tired voice. The documents look official. They show you were at a clinic in Yazoo City 8 months ago that— It's a lie, Celeste shouted, throwing the folder to the ground. I was never pregnant. I never went to that clinic. I can prove it. Tears ran freely down her face, but there was something more than pain. There was the righteous fury of someone whose truth had been violated. I was never with any man before I met you, she continued, her voice trembling. Never. Silas tried, but I defended myself. That's the real reason I ran. Because he— Her voice broke. He threatened me, said if I didn't submit voluntarily, he'd force me on our wedding night. And my family, my own family, didn't believe me when I told them. Donovan felt something break in his chest, not his doubts, but any remaining fragment of consideration for Vivienne. I believe you, he said simply, hugging her as she sobbed. I believe you completely, and I'm going to find out how she got those fake documents, and I'm going to make sure she faces legal consequences. But the damage was done. That night, Celeste went back to packing her suitcase, and this time Donovan didn't know if he could convince her to stay, because some wounds cut so deep that even the most genuine love struggled to heal them. The following days were the darkest since the relationship began. Celeste locked herself again in the North Charleston apartment, refusing all of Donovan's calls. Mira acted as intermediary, passing messages, but the situation was unsustainable. She says she can't take it anymore, Mira explained to Donovan in a cafe on King Street, speaking low so no one would hear. She says every time she starts to believe she can have a normal life, something drags her back to hell. That your niece forged medical documents, that she violated her most intimate privacy, and that even though you fired Vivienne, the damage is already done. Donovan looked haggard. He hadn't slept well in days, dedicating every hour to meeting with lawyers, legitimate investigators, contacting authorities in Mississippi to confirm what he already knew. The documents were fake. Dr. Morrison didn't even exist. Vivienne had paid a forger in Colombia to create convincing medical records. I filed criminal charges against Vivienne, Donovan said, his voice hoarse. Forgery of official documents, defamation, invasion of privacy. She could face years in prison. And does that give Celeste back her peace of mind? Mira asked gently. Donovan, I care about you. I see how you look at her. I see your intentions are genuine. But she's broken. Every time she starts to trust, something hits her again. I don't know if she can keep fighting. What can I do? He asked desperately. Tell me what to do and I'll do it. I don't know, Mira admitted. And I think that's the frightening answer. There's nothing you can do except give her space and hope she decides it's worth trying again. That night, Donovan made a radical decision. He wrote a letter, long and painful, in which he put on paper everything he felt. He didn't try to convince her to stay, didn't promise everything would be fixed. Instead, he thanked her for showing him what it meant to live authentically, asked forgiveness for not having better protected her privacy, and told her that if she decided to leave, he would respect her decision without trying to stop her. But if you decide to give me another chance, he wrote at the end, I promise to dedicate every remaining day of my life to building a space where you feel safe, valued, and free. Not because you need it to be complete, but because it's the least you deserve. The letter was delivered by Mira. Donovan received no response for 3 agonizing days. During that time, Marcus visited him at the estate, finding him sitting in the garden where it had all begun, looking at the jasmine that Celeste had planted months ago. They're blooming, Marcus commented, sitting beside him. She said they would take time, but here they are. I don't know if she'll see them, Donovan responded with a hollow voice. I don't know if she'll come back. Marcus sighed. You know, when I met you 20 years ago, you were a man hungry for success, determined to prove that a fisherman's son could conquer the world, and you did. You built an empire, but somewhere along the way, you forgot why you were doing it. I did it to never feel insignificant again, Donovan admitted, so no one could look at me with contempt for my humble origins. And did it work? Donovan laughed bitterly. I got the respect of the wrong people. People who valued my bank account but despised everything that really mattered. Celeste showed me that. She showed me I had built a golden prison. Then maybe, regardless of what she decides, This process was already worth it, Marcus said, because you freed yourself. You gave up a world that was slowly killing you. That has value, even if she doesn't come back. But Donovan wasn't convinced. For the first time in his life, money and success meant nothing. He only wanted to see Celeste smile again, hear her sing gospel while working in the garden, discuss medical books she read with fascination. On the fourth day, Mira called. She wants to see you, tomorrow, at Waterfront Park, at dawn. Donovan barely slept that night. He arrived at the park when the sky was still dark, with only the first pink brushstrokes of dawn. Celeste was already there, standing near the water, barefoot on the cool grass, wrapped in a shawl he recognized as having belonged to his grandmother. "Thank you for coming," she said without turning around. "I'll always come when you need me," he responded, maintaining the distance she needed. "I read your letter," Celeste continued. "I read it 20 times, and each time I cried a little less and thought a little more. And what conclusion did you reach?" She finally turned. Her eyes were red but clear, like after a storm that cleared the air. "That I've spent my entire life running, from my family, from Silas, from Mississippi, and when I came here I thought I was finally running toward something, toward freedom. But I realized something. I was still running. Every time something scared me, every time someone hurt me, my first reaction was to flee. It's survival instinct," Donovan said gently. "There's no shame in that." "But I don't want to survive," her voice broke. "I want to live, I want to stop running, and I think the only way to do that is by facing my fears instead of running from them." Donovan's heart began to beat with hope, but he didn't dare move. "What does that mean?" Celeste took a step toward him, then another. "It means I'm tired of letting my past dictate my future, that I'm tired of giving power to cruel people like Vivian, that I'm tired of punishing myself by denying something beautiful out of fear they'll take it away." Now they were inches apart. The sun began to appear over Charleston Harbor, painting the sky orange and gold. "I'm afraid," she admitted, "very afraid. But I've discovered there are different types of fear. There's the fear that paralyzes you, and the fear that pushes you to grow. And I think with you I'm ready for the second kind." "Are you sure?" Donovan asked, his voice trembling. "Because I won't pressure, I won't rush. If you need more time." Celeste placed her finger on his lips, silencing him. "I've had enough time. What I need now is courage. And you've shown me what it means to be truly brave. It's not having no fear. It's having fear and choosing hope anyway." When their lips finally met, it was different from the first kiss they'd shared months ago. That one had been tentative, full of doubts and untested promises. This was a conscious commitment, two people choosing love with eyes wide open to the risks, knowing the path would be difficult, but that they would walk it together. Behind them, the Atlantic roared its eternal approval, silent witness to a new beginning. But they both knew this wasn't the end of their problems. Vivienne would face legal consequences, but her poison had already spread. Charleston society would continue judging, and Celeste's inner demons wouldn't disappear overnight. What they had now was a mutual decision, to face everything together. And sometimes that decision was all that was needed to begin true healing. The weeks following the beach reconciliation were a period of delicate reconstruction. Celeste returned to working in the gardens, but with a difference. Donovan had bought the neighboring property and transformed it into a space where she could freely experiment with medicinal plants, combining her love of gardening with her old dream of medicine. "It's not a school yet," he said one afternoon as they toured the newly prepared grounds, "but it could be, if you want, when you're ready." Celeste touched the earth reverently, feeling its texture between her fingers. "My grandmother used to say the earth never lies, that if you give it what it needs, it returns life multiplied. But if you neglect it or force it, it closes up. Like people," Donovan observed. "Like people," she repeated with a sad smile. But the tranquility wouldn't last. One November afternoon, while Celeste organized seedlings in the new greenhouse, Mira came running, breathless and pale-faced. "It's your father," she said between gasps. "He's here, in Charleston. And he brought Silas." Celeste's world stopped. Her hands shook so much that she dropped the pot she was holding, which shattered against the stone floor. How did they find me?" "Your older brother apparently has contacts here. Worked construction years ago. Someone saw you with me and connected the dots. Mira took her hands. Celeste, they're at the apartment right now, demanding to talk to you. Your father says you've dishonored the family, that Silas is still willing to marry you if you return and apologize. Fury replaced fear in Celeste's eyes. Apologize? For what? For not letting a brute treat me like cattle? Donovan, who had heard everything from the greenhouse door, approached. You don't have to face them if you don't want to. I can call the police, have them removed. No, Celeste interrupted, with a firmness that surprised even herself. No, I've run enough. It's time to face them. But, she looked at Donovan, will you come with me? To the end of the world, if you ask, he responded without hesitation. The North Charleston apartment was small, and felt even smaller with the presence of 3 burly men. Earl Monroe, Celeste's father, was 60 but looked older, weathered by years of work under the Mississippi sun and hardened by a life of rigid beliefs. Silas Dutton stood beside him, a thick-set man with eyes that promised cruelty. The third man was Jackson, Celeste's older brother, who avoided looking at her directly. There's the disgrace, Earl spat when Celeste entered with Donovan by her side. You thought you could run from your family, from your responsibilities, and there'd be no consequences. Celeste felt the familiar urge to shrink, to become invisible, but Donovan's hand in hers reminded her she was no longer the helpless girl from Mississippi. I didn't run from responsibilities, she said in a clear voice. I ran from abuse. There's a difference. Abuse? Silas stepped forward. Is that what you call a man who offered to care for you, give you a decent home, a respected name? I call abuse a man who slapped me for not submitting to his demands, Celeste responded, feeling years of silence finally breaking. I call abuse a father who burned my books, who destroyed my dreams because they didn't fit his narrow vision of what a woman should be. I call abuse a family that valued tradition over my happiness, my safety, my very life. Insolent, Earl growled. I should have disciplined you better when you were a child. Donovan tensed, taking a protective step in front of Celeste, but she stopped him with a gesture. No, let me, she said softly. I need to do this. She turned to her father, and though she was nearly a foot shorter in that moment, she seemed bigger. Daddy, I spent 22 years trying to be the daughter you wanted, silent, obedient, invisible. I became a shadow in my own life, and when I finally found the courage to choose something different, to choose myself, you called it dishonor. Because it is, Earl insisted. A woman who abandons her family, who rejects an honorable marriage, who... Honorable? Celeste's voice rose. What's honorable about forcing a woman to marry a man she fears? What's honorable about ignoring her pleas, her tears, her bruises? Jackson finally spoke. Celeste, it's not that simple. In our world there are rules, expectations. Silas already paid the dowry. The family already made arrangements. Then give him back the money, Donovan said, speaking for the first time. His voice was controlled, but lethal. How much was it? I'll pay it right now. Transfer triple if that convinces you to leave Celeste alone. Silas looked at him with contempt. Ah, so this is the rich man who's bewitched her. Think your Charleston money can buy everything. This is a matter of honor, not business. Honor isn't bought or sold, Donovan responded firmly, and it certainly isn't found in men who raise their hands to defenseless women. The tension in the room was palpable. Silas looked ready to physically attack Donovan when Mira intervened. I think it's time for you to leave, she said with surprising bravery. This is my home, and I won't authorize more violence here. We're not leaving without her, Earl declared. She's our blood. She owes obedience to her father. I owe you nothing. Celeste felt tears running down her face, but her voice didn't waver. Nothing. You gave me life, that's true. But a life without freedom, without respect, without genuine love, isn't a gift. It's a prison, and I've served my sentence. If you walk out that door with him, Earl threatened, pointing at Donovan, you have no family. You'll be dead to us. The silence that followed was devastating. Celeste felt something break inside her chest. Not her defenses this time, but the last invisible chains that bound her to a family that had never truly valued her. Then I have no family, she finally said, her voice barely a whisper but clear. And that's okay, because I've learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about who supports you, who respects your choices, who celebrates your successes instead of resenting them. She took Donovan's hand and Mira's. This is my family now, and if that offends you, you can live with your offense. I'll live with my freedom. Earl, Silas, and Jackson left in furious silence. The door closed with a slam that echoed like a gunshot. And then Celeste collapsed, all the years of tension, fear, and trauma finally releasing in sobs that shook her entire body. Donovan and Mira held her as she cried, not trying to stop her tears but simply being present. Because sometimes the deepest love is expressed not in grand words, but in the willingness to sit with someone in their pain, to witness their breaking without trying to fix it. When she finally calmed down, Celeste looked up. "I don't know how I'm supposed to feel," she admitted. "I just lost my family. I should be devastated." "And you are," Donovan said gently. "But you're also free. Both things can be true at the same time." That night marked a turning point. Celeste had faced her deepest ghosts and had survived. Not without scars, not without pain, but with her dignity intact and her freedom assured. And though she didn't know it yet, that confrontation would be the catalyst for something extraordinary. Because sometimes we need to lose everything to find what really matters. And what really mattered stood before her. A man who had defended her without trying to fight her battles for her. A cousin who had been more sister than any blood brother, and a city by the sea that slowly was becoming her true home. The days after the confrontation were strange. Celeste experienced moments of intense relief, alternating with unexpected waves of sadness. Sometimes she cried for no apparent reason, other times laughed with a freedom she had never felt before. "It's grief," Donovan explained one afternoon as they prepared dinner at the estate, an activity that had become their shared ritual. "Not just for your family, but for the version of yourself you had to abandon to be who you are now." Celeste was chopping tomatoes for a salad, the knife moving rhythmically. "Have you ever wondered who you'd be if you hadn't had to fight so hard?" she asked. "If you'd been born into a family that supported your dreams, in a place that celebrated your differences." "All the time," Donovan admitted, stirring a pot of she-crab soup that filled the kitchen with the aroma of crab and cream. "I wonder if I would have been happier, less ambitious. If I would have appreciated simple things more instead of constantly chasing the next success. And what do you conclude? That I can't change the past, but I can choose what to do with the lessons it taught me." He looked directly at her. "Same as you." It was a simple but profound truth. They were building something new from the fragments of their broken pasts, and though the process was painful, it was also beautiful in its imperfection. But the universe still had tests reserved. A week later, Donovan collapsed while they were working together in the garden. He simply fell to the ground, his face pale and covered in cold sweat. Celeste screamed for help while holding his head, terrified of losing him just when she had found the courage to love him completely. The ambulance arrived in minutes that felt like hours. At MUSC Hospital, doctors diagnosed severe pneumonia combined with extreme exhaustion. The Carolina winter was unforgiving, and Donovan's body, weakened by months of emotional stress and personal neglect, had simply given out. "He needs absolute rest for at least 6 weeks," explained Dr. Patricia Wells. "His immune system is compromised. At his age, this isn't something to take lightly." Celeste practically moved into the hospital. Mira brought changes of clothes and food, Marcus handled urgent business matters, but she refused to leave his side. It was as if, after years of not being able to protect anyone, including herself, she finally had the chance to care for someone who deserved it. One night, while Donovan dozed under the effect of antibiotics, Celeste met his ex-wife. Lauren appeared without warning, an elegant woman in her late 40s with short dark hair and eyes that had seen both love and disappointment. "You must be Celeste," she said, not with hostility, but genuine curiosity. Celeste nodded cautiously. "I'm sorry if this is awkward. I just wanted to make sure he was okay." "It's not awkward." Lauren sat in the other chair beside the bed. "Donovan and I didn't end as enemies. We ended as two people who wanted different things from life." She looked at the sleeping man with a complex expression. "He looks better than the last time I saw him, 3 years ago. More at peace somehow, despite being sick. He's changed a lot," Celeste said softly. "He resigned from his position at the company, simplified his life." Lauren smiled sadly. "I asked him for years to do exactly that, to value time together over contracts, to choose moments over money. But he wasn't ready. He needed to lose everything to learn that lesson. "Why did you come?" Celeste asked directly. "Because Marcus called me and said something interesting, that Donovan had finally found what he'd always been looking for, but that he'd found it in someone who was too afraid to fully accept it." Lauren looked at her intensely. "Is that true?" Celeste felt tears threatening. "I'm so afraid," she admitted, "of not being enough, of him waking up one day and realizing he sacrificed too much for me. Of this being temporary." "Everything is temporary," Lauren responded with hard-won wisdom. "Love, life, everything. The question isn't whether it will last forever. The question is it worth living fully while it lasts? What if I break again? What if he—" "Then you'll break and rebuild yourself like you did before," Lauren interrupted. "Celeste, I can see in your eyes what he sees. Extraordinary strength disguised as fragility. Don't underestimate him. And more importantly, don't underestimate yourself." Donovan stirred in bed, waking slowly. His blurry gaze focused first on Celeste, then on Lauren, and he smiled weakly. "Am I dreaming, or is it Judgment Day?" he joked with a hoarse voice. "Neither, you idiot," Lauren responded affectionately. "I just came to make sure this woman knew what she was getting into with you. All bad, I imagine." "And some good things," Lauren admitted, standing up. "Take care of yourself, Donovan. And take care of her. She deserves everything I couldn't give you." She left, leaving a comfortable silence. Donovan took Celeste's hand. "You're not going to let me die here, are you?" he asked with weak humor. "You wouldn't be so lucky," she responded, but her eyes were full of tears. "You scared me so much. I'm sorry. I guess I forgot I'm not invincible." He looked at her seriously. "Celeste, when I was unconscious, I had strange dreams. About my father, about all the time I wasted building things that didn't matter. And I realized something. I don't want any more wasted time. Not with you." "What does that mean?" she asked, her heart racing. "It means when I get out of here, I want us to start building something real. Your medical school if you still want it. A shared home if you're ready. A life where every day we count our blessings instead of our achievements." Celeste felt something fundamentally shift inside her. It wasn't that fear disappeared, but for the first time, hope was stronger than fear. "I'm ready," she whispered. "Scared, but ready." "Then we'll be scared together," he responded, squeezing her hand. "But together." Donovan's recovery was slow but steady. And during those weeks of convalescence, while Celeste cared for him with fierce tenderness, they both discovered a fundamental truth. True love wasn't the absence of problems or fears. It was the daily decision to face them together, not to run when things got difficult, to choose vulnerability over self-protection. They were finally ready for the next chapter. And though they didn't know it yet, that chapter would bring both challenges and triumphs, moments of doubt and absolute certainty. But they would face it as they had learned, one step at a time, with patience, with honesty, and with faith that some loves were worth every tear, every conquered fear, every brave choice. Spring arrived in Charleston with its characteristic beauty. The azaleas bloomed along the Battery, the live oaks covered themselves in fresh green, and the Atlantic lost part of its winter fury, becoming almost docile under blue skies. Donovan had fully recovered his health, and with it, renewed determination. But this time his energy wasn't directed at commercial deals or business expansions. It focused on something much more significant, fulfilling the promise he had made to Celeste. One April morning, he took her to the land overlooking the harbor he had mentioned months ago. But what she found wasn't an empty lot. There was a structure under construction, walls of local stone combined with large windows that took advantage of natural light, designed by a young architect from Savannah, that Donovan had specifically hired for her focus on humanistic educational spaces. Celeste couldn't finish the sentence, overwhelmed by emotion. "Your school," Donovan completed. "Well, our school, a medical and herbology training center for young women, especially those who, like you, were forced to abandon their dreams. Capacity for 30 residential students, with one-year programs, completely free, financed by a foundation I established." "But how? When?" "During my convalescence," he explained with a smile. "Turns out being bedridden for 6 weeks gives you a lot of time to plan." Marcus thought I was delirious from the antibiotics when I called talking about foundation statutes and educational programs. But here it is. Celeste walked through the construction site, touching the half-finished walls, imagining the classrooms, the laboratories, the gardens where students would learn about medicinal plants. It wasn't just a building. It was the materialization of a dream she had buried under years of resignation. "I don't know what to say," she finally whispered. "Say you'll do it," Donovan responded. "Say you'll run this place, that you'll share everything you've learned, that you'll give other girls the opportunity you were denied." "But I don't have formal credentials. I haven't even finished high school." "Then you'll finish it," he interrupted firmly. "I hired private tutors. In 6 months you can get your GED, and after that, if you want, college. Medicine proper or advanced herbology, whatever you choose. You have the knowledge and the passion. You just need the official papers this stupid society demands." For the first time since the confrontation with her family, Celeste felt something pure and untainted, absolute hope. Not the cautious hope tinged with fear she had felt before, but a brilliant conviction that her life was finally taking the course it always should have had. She threw herself into Donovan's arms with such force that they almost fell to the ground. Between kisses and tears of joy, she whispered over and over, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." "Don't thank me," he said softly. "This isn't a gift. It's justice. It's what you always should have had." The following months were a whirlwind of activity. Celeste studied with fierce dedication, recovering years of lost education. Donovan was amazed at her learning speed, how she devoured biology and chemistry texts like novels, how she could memorize Latin scientific names that seemed like impossible tongue twisters to him. Meanwhile, construction of the school progressed, but not without obstacles. Vivian, from her forced exile in Atlanta where she now worked for a competing company, attempted one last attack. She hired lawyers who filed frivolous lawsuits trying to stop construction, alleged environmental violations, questionable permits, any tactic that could delay the project. Donovan fought every legal battle with patience and practically unlimited resources. But it was Celeste who finally found the solution. She researched Vivian's connections in Atlanta and discovered the company she worked for was involved in questionable labor practices. With Marcus's help, they gathered evidence and delivered it anonymously to federal labor authorities. "Since when are you so strategic?" Donovan asked, impressed, when Vivian withdrew all lawsuits after her new company was investigated. "I grew up in an environment where you had to learn to defend your space without direct confrontation," Celeste responded. "Women in my town developed certain survival skills." Donovan's admiration for her grew every day, not just for her intelligence or determination, but for her ability to remain compassionate, even when she had reasons to be bitter. When Vivian finally wrote an awkward but genuine apology letter, it was Celeste who advocated for forgiveness. "Resentment is poison we drink hoping it kills others," she said. "I've lived through enough hate. I prefer peace." In October, exactly 1 year after that disastrous first social encounter at the Charleston Club, Celeste passed her GED exams with exceptional grades. The ceremony was small, just Donovan, Mira, Marcus, and surprisingly, Lauren, who had developed an unexpected friendship with Celeste. "At your age, I was in my second miscarriage and first year of a marriage that was already dying," Lauren commented, toasting with champagne. "You're rebuilding your life from scratch. That's real courage." That night, walking along the Battery under a starlit sky where the Milky Way was clearly visible, Celeste took Donovan's hand and said something he had patiently waited to hear. "I'm ready." "Ready for what?" he asked, though he suspected the answer. "For everything, to live with you, to fully commit, to stop having one foot out the door in case I need to escape." She looked directly at him. "I don't want to escape anymore. I want to build." Donovan felt his heart could explode with happiness, but he stayed calm. "Are you absolutely sure? Because once we cross this threshold, there's no going back," she completed. "I know. And that's exactly what I want. No safety nets, no escape plans. Just total commitment to what we're building." They kissed under the stars, while the ocean whispered its eternal blessing. And in that moment, they both knew they had reached the true turning point. Not the beginning of their relationship, not the first "I love you," but this conscious, mature decision to choose each other without reservations. But the universe held one more test, one that would prove not their love, but their ability to maintain individual identity within a relationship, to grow together without losing themselves in each other. And that test would arrive in the most unexpected way. November brought the first serious winter storms. The Atlantic turned dark and tempestuous, waves crashing against the seawall with primitive fury, and it was in the midst of this dramatic weather that a letter arrived that would change everything again. Miss Sarah, Celeste's former teacher in Mississippi, had passed away. The news came from a colleague who remembered conversations about the brilliant student who escaped to the South. But what made the letter truly significant was what it contained. Miss Sarah had left Celeste as sole heir to her small house on the outskirts of town, and more importantly, her extensive library of medical and scientific texts, some of them rare and valuable. "I need to go," Celeste said after reading the letter 3 times. "I need to go to Mississippi, settle the estate, bring the books, but above all, I need to say goodbye to the only person who believed in me when no one else did." "I'll go with you," Donovan said immediately. "No." Celeste's answer was soft but firm. "I need to do this alone." She saw the pain in his eyes and hurried to explain. "Not because I don't want your support, but because all my life someone has been controlling my movements, dictating my decisions, even when they came from a place of love. My father, my family, even Silas, in his twisted way. And then you, in the most beautiful way possible, but still, rescuing me, protecting me, solving my problems." "I thought that's what you wanted," Donovan said, genuinely confused. "And I did want it. I needed it. But now," Celeste searched for the right words, "I need to prove to myself that I can face my past alone, that I can return to the place that broke me and come out whole. Not for you, but for me." It was one of the most difficult conversations of their relationship. Donovan had every protective instinct screaming not to let her go alone, that Mississippi was dangerous, that her family might try something. But he also recognized the truth in her words. They had built a relationship where he was the protector and she was the protected, and though it had been necessary at first, now it risked becoming a gilded cage. "How long?" he finally asked. "A week, maybe 2. Depends on legal procedures and how long it takes me to pack the books. Promise me you'll call every day, and that if there's any problem, any threat—" "I'll call," she promised. "But Donovan, trust me. Trust that I can handle this." The goodbye at the bus station was heartbreaking. Celeste carried a new suitcase, appropriate clothes, money she herself had earned and saved. She was no longer the terrified girl who had fled in darkness. She was a woman returning with dignity. The journey to Mississippi was long and full of memories. Each mile north brought familiar landscapes, the Atlantic coast giving way to inland plains, the lush green of South Carolina becoming the golden yellow of the rural South, the cool sea air replaced by dry heat, and the smell of earth and pines. When she finally arrived at her town, she felt a complex mixture of emotions. Nothing had changed. The same dusty streets, the same whitewashed houses with tin roofs, the same faces of neighbors who looked at her with a mixture of recognition and disapproval. Miss Sarah's house was on the outskirts, a modest construction with a neglected garden. The colleague who had written the letter, Mrs. Henderson, was waiting with the keys. "She talked about you until her last days," she said, while opening the door. "She said you were her greatest success, proof that education could liberate." The house was full of books, not just on shelves, but stacked on tables, chairs, even the floor. Medical texts from the 50s and 60s, some in French and English, scientific journals from decades ago. It was a treasure of knowledge accumulated by a woman who had dedicated her life to teaching in a town that barely valued her. Celeste spent the following days cataloguing, cleaning, packing. And at night, she stayed in a small-town motel, aware that her family lived just 2 blocks away but refusing to seek them out. They had made their choice. She had made hers. But the town was small. It was inevitable they would meet. It happened at the Saturday market. Celeste was buying boxes for the books when she saw her mother at a vegetable stand. She looked older, more tired, the weight of a joyless life visible in every line of her face. Their eyes met. For a moment neither spoke. Then her mother slowly approached. "You look good," she finally said. "Different. Stronger." "I'm well, Mama," Celeste responded cautiously. "Your father, he hasn't changed his mind." Says he has no daughter. I know. There was a long silence. Then her mother did something she had never done, openly defied her husband's will. But I have a daughter, and I need you to know, her voice broke, that I'm proud of you. Scared for you, angry at you sometimes, but above all proud. You did what I never had the courage to do. Celeste felt tears burning her eyes. Mama, it's never too late. You could— No, her mother interrupted firmly. My life is here. I chose 40 years ago, and though it wasn't the right choice, it's my choice. But yours, your life is somewhere else, with other people. And that's okay. They embraced briefly, awkwardly, two women separated by irreconcilable life decisions, but connected by blood and, finally, mutual respect. Take care of yourself, her mother said as they separated, and take care of that man who looks at you like you're the most valuable thing in the world. How do you know? Town's small, news travels. They say you refused a rich farmer for an even richer Charleston businessman. She smiled sadly. But I believe you chose someone who treats you as an equal. That's worth more than all the soybeans in Mississippi. When Celeste returned to Charleston a week later, with 3 large boxes of books and a heart simultaneously heavier and lighter, Donovan waited for her at the bus station. When he saw her, he ran toward her, and the embrace they shared was different from all previous ones. It was the embrace of two complete people, not fragments seeking to complete each other, but wholes choosing to share their lives. You did it, he said with genuine pride. You went, faced your ghosts, and came back on your own. Yes, she responded, smiling through happy tears. And now I know with absolute certainty that I'm not with you because I need you to survive. I'm with you because I choose you every day consciously. It was the difference between dependence and genuine love, and that difference would mark everything that came after. The school opened its doors in March, exactly 2 years after Celeste had first arrived in Charleston. The inauguration ceremony was moving, 30 young women from across the South, many with stories similar to Celeste's, standing in the courtyard of the new building, ready to begin a different life. Celeste gave a speech that left many in tears. This school isn't just about medicine or herbology, she said, her voice clear and strong. It's about reminding women who have been silenced that their voices matter. It's about giving tools not just to make a living but to live with dignity. It's about demonstrating that our origins don't determine our destiny, but give us unique and valuable perspectives. Donovan watched from the side, Marcus beside him. I never thought I'd see the day you'd give up your empire for something like this, Marcus commented. I didn't give up anything, Donovan responded. I just changed what I value, and what I value now, he pointed at Celeste, radiant before her students, is worth more than everything I built before. The following months were intense. Celeste dove into teaching with fierce passion, combining scientific knowledge with practical wisdom, respecting both modern medicine and ancient herbal traditions. The students adored her because they saw in her their possible future, someone who had survived the worst and emerged triumphant. But success brought new pressure. National media began to take interest in the story of the Mississippi girl who conquered a Charleston magnate's heart and transformed his fortune into hope. Journalists wanted to interview her. TV programs invited her. And though the attention validated the project, it also began to weigh on her. One July night, after a particularly exhausting day where she'd given 6 hours of classes, followed by an interview for a New York newspaper, Celeste collapsed emotionally. Donovan found her in the garden crying among the jasmine that had bloomed splendidly. I can't do everything, she sobbed. I can't be the perfect director, the inspiring teacher, the spokesperson for all abused women in America, and your partner, all at the same time. Something's going to break, and I'm afraid it'll be me. Donovan sat beside her on the damp earth, not caring about staining his expensive clothes. Then don't do everything, he said simply. Hire assistant directors. Delegate classes refuse interviews. Celeste, you built this, but you don't have to carry it alone on your shoulders. But I feel like I owe it to all those girls, to all the women who— You don't owe them your own destruction, he interrupted firmly. You owe them an example of someone who sets healthy boundaries, who recognizes their limitations, who asks for help when needed. That's more valuable than working yourself to death. It was a turning point. Celeste learned to delegate. to trust a team of talented educators who shared her vision. She began refusing public commitments that exhausted her without truly contributing to the school's mission. And most importantly, she began reserving time just for herself and Donovan, recognizing that their relationship also needed constant nourishment. One Saturday in September, while sailing a small boat in Charleston Harbor, enjoying the spring sun and the taste of cold champagne, Donovan asked something he had been postponing. "What do you think about marriage?" Celeste looked at him surprised. "Are you proposing to me on a boat?" "Technically, I'm just asking your opinion about the institution in general," he responded with a smile, but there was real nervousness in his eyes. Celeste reflected carefully. "For years, I hated the idea of marriage. For me, it represented slavery, loss of identity, becoming someone's property. But with you," she looked at the sparkling water, "with you, I've learned that marriage can be something else. It can be a partnership of equals, a continuous choice to build something together while maintaining our individuality." "So is that a yes?" "It's, depends how you ask," she responded with a mischievous smile. Donovan laughed, the sound rich and genuine. But he didn't pull out a ring, didn't kneel. Instead, he took her hands. "Celeste Munro, I don't want you to be my wife in the traditional sense of the word. I want you to be my partner, my equal, my adventure companion. I want to wake up beside you for the next 50 years if we're that lucky. I want to build a legacy together that goes beyond money or success. A legacy of transformed lives, patient love, mutual respect. Will you do me the honor of formally choosing me as I choose you?" Celeste felt her heart explode with happiness. "Yes," she whispered, "1,000 times yes." But instead of an expensive ring, Donovan gave something different, the design for a second school he planned to build in Jackson, Mississippi, closer to her homeland. It would be their joint project, financed half by his fortune, half by scholarships she would manage. A perfect symbol of their partnership, neither absorbing the other, both contributing from their unique strengths. "It's not a diamond ring," he said, "but I thought it would mean more." "It means everything," she responded, studying the plans with shining eyes. "It's perfect." They kissed while the boat gently rocked in the harbor, the sun beginning to set behind the battery, painting the sky impossible oranges and pinks. And in that moment, they both knew they had reached the climax of their journey. Not an ending because the best stories don't end, they simply continue, but a point of maturity, of complete understanding of what they had built together. They had started as two broken people trying to heal. Now they were two complete people choosing to grow together. And that difference changed everything. The wedding was celebrated in spring, 3 years after that first encounter in the garden. It was a small, intimate event at Donovan's estate, now transformed into a true home with Celeste's contributions. Pots of medicinal herbs in every window, medical books sharing space with novels by Pat Conroy, photographs of Mississippi alongside Carolina landscapes. The ceremony beautifully merged traditions. An open-minded Catholic priest officiated alongside a gospel choir that sang old spirituals. Celeste wore a simple cream dress with southern lace, while Donovan wore a dark suit with a magnolia boutonniere. The vows were written by them in a blend that symbolized their two worlds meeting. "I promise to respect your silences as much as your words," Celeste said. "I promise to celebrate your successes without envy and support your failures without judgment. I promise to be your partner, not your shadow. I promise to choose you every day, not out of need, but from genuine desire to walk this life beside you. I promise never to try to change you," Donovan responded with an emotional voice. "I promise to give you space to grow, even when that means temporarily letting you go. I promise to listen more than I advise, accompany more than I direct. I promise our love will always be a garden where we both can flourish, not a cage where one of us withers." Among the guests were people from both lives, Mira, of course, as maid of honor, Marcus as best man, Lauren, surprisingly, who had developed a genuine friendship with Celeste, based on mutual understanding of having loved the same man at different stages of his evolution. The first graduates of the school, now working as nurses and herbalists in hospitals throughout the South. And even, to everyone's surprise, Celeste's mother, who had traveled alone from Mississippi, finally defying her husband. "Your father will never forgive," she told Celeste before the ceremony. But I wanted to be here. I wanted to see my daughter marry someone who looks at her like she's God's most perfect creation. The reception combined the best of both traditions: she-crab soup alongside Mississippi catfish, oyster roast sharing the table with fried chicken, sweet tea flowing freely alongside bourbon. The music alternated between bluegrass and beach music, and in a memorable moment, Celeste taught Donovan to two-step while he showed her the Charleston steps. But the most moving moment came at the end of the night. Donovan led Celeste to the garden where it had all begun, now transformed into a magical space with fairy lights hanging from trees and the intoxicating aroma of jasmine in full bloom. 3 years ago, he said softly, I saw a woman planting seeds and singing like no one was watching. She seemed like the image of pure freedom, something I'd lost decades ago. And I thought, if I could be near that light, maybe I'd find my own. And you did, Celeste said, resting her head on his shoulder. No, he corrected. I didn't find it. We built it together, because it turned out we were both lost, just in different ways. You needed security and respect, I needed purpose and authenticity. And together, he looked around the garden, together we created something neither could have achieved alone. Celeste looked up at him directly. You know what's most beautiful? That you didn't save me. I wasn't your rescue project. We were two people who saved each other simply by being honest about our wounds and patient with each other's healing. True love isn't about rescues, Donovan reflected. It's about companionship in growth. They stood in silence, hearing the distant sound of Atlantic waves and the laughter of guests inside the house. They had traveled an extraordinary path since that first glance over a stone fence. A path full of pain, yes, but also transformation, learning, and finally, genuine love. Months later, when the second school opened in Jackson with Celeste supervising its launch and a local team managing daily operations, they realized they had created something bigger than themselves. It wasn't just about two people finding each other, but about the ripple effect of that love on hundreds of lives. Students from both schools graduated and moved forward, carrying not just medical knowledge, but a different model of relationships, respect, possibility. Some returned to their towns and slowly but steadily transformed mentalities. Others established clinics in underserved rural areas. All carried the seed that women deserve dignity, education, and autonomy. One winter night, 5 years after their first meeting, Celeste and Donovan sat on their porch overlooking the ocean. She was studying for her final exam in advanced herbology at college. He was reading a book about environmental sustainability he was considering for his new business direction. Do you ever regret it? Celeste suddenly asked. Changing so much of your life, giving up your empire, complicating your existence with a problematic Mississippi girl. Donovan closed his book and looked at her with an intensity that still, after years, made her blush. Every day, he said, and before she could react, continued, every day I regret not making these changes sooner, wasting so many years chasing things that didn't matter. But never, not a single second, do I regret you. You're the best decision I ever made in my life. Not because you complete me, because that's not your responsibility, but because you inspire me to be my best version. Same here, she whispered, taking his hand. You gave me something I never had. Time. Time to heal, time to grow, time to discover who I was without the weight of others' expectations. That's the most precious gift. As the sun set over the Atlantic, painting the sky with impossible colors, two people who had started broken and scared sat together, complete not because they had found each other, but because they had chosen to build something beautiful from their individual fragments. Their roots, one from Mississippi and one from South Carolina, had intertwined, creating something new. Not a tree that absorbed the other, but two trees growing together, their roots providing mutual stability, while their branches reached for the sky independently but in harmony. And in the garden where it all began, the jasmine planted years ago now covered the entire fence, its sweet fragrance mixing with the salty ocean air in an olfactory symphony that was uniquely theirs. A perfect reminder that life's most beautiful things require patience, care, and above all, the courage to believe in the possibility of transformation. Because in the end, true love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone perfectly imperfect and choosing every day to build something extraordinary together. It was about giving space to grow while remaining rooted. It was about respecting each other's past while building a shared future. And as stars began to appear in Charleston's night sky, Celeste and Donovan knew with absolute certainty they had found exactly that. Not a fairy tale, but something better. A real story of two people who had learned that the best kind of love doesn't rush, doesn't demand, doesn't possess. It simply waits, cares, respects, and grows. Like the jasmine seeds once planted by a young Mississippi woman singing gospel, never imagining she was also planting the seeds of her own transformation and of a love that would change not just her life, but the lives of hundreds who would come after.